I'm going through some actual dates, sequence of events. I know that's not the most popular thing with historians anymore, but sometimes you start to see cause and effect if you put enough things in sequence. But before I actually get into that, Abelard Guthrie and his wife have been mentioned a number of times. I might elaborate just a little bit on who precisely they were. Abelard Guthrie was a Euro-American. He had been working in the registrar's office in Ohio when the Wyandottes were ready for their removal to Kansas back in 1842. At that point, he met Nancy Brown, a Michigan Wyandotte from a fairly prominent family, fell in love with her, followed her to Kansas after the Wyandottes came here in 43, married her over her father's objections, and was adopted into the Wyandotte tribe, which adoption is not at all unusual for Iroquois tribes in general and for the Wyandottes in particular. One historian said that by the time the Wyandottes came here, the last pure descent Wyandotte had died in Canada in 1820. The Wyandottes were all racially mixed, primarily between European and Native American, but also there were at least a couple of families that also had black ancestry. I know this has confused some people at the state level at times because they see all these English names. They assume these are like Missourians or somebody. They're Wyandottes. Most Wyandottes had two names. They had an English name, they had an Indian name. They did not use them at the same time and under the same circumstances, which is why I've always found references to Quindaro Nancy Brown or Nancy Quindaro Brown to be unusual, because that is the only time I have ever come across a Wyandotte name and an English name of the same individual being used in conjunction. And I suspect that didn't happen at the time. I suspect it's something that happened later, in later years. Quindaro was actually Abelard Guthrie's idea initially. He proposed it in the fall of 1856 to Charles H. Branscombe. Branscombe told it to James Redpath. Redpath told it to Charles Robinson and Samuel M. Simpson. Simpson and Robinson then in September of 56 approached Guthrie with the idea of the development. And as had been said, the principal benefit of the god-awful site was that it had a natural stone steamboat landing on the river. You're going to have to bear with me because I'm leafing through a fairly lengthy chronology here. The Quindaro Town Company was formed on November 21st of 1856 with Wyandotte Joel Walker as president. Abelard Guthrie was vice president. Samuel M. Simpson was secretary and superintendent of investments. Bad move. And Dr. Charles Robinson was treasurer and agent for the town. And this is where you start coming into the Quindaro mythology. The president of the town company, Joel Walker, Wyandotte, a member of a very prominent Wyandotte family. He, like his two brothers, was a slave owner. At the time of his death, he had two slaves listed in his estate, a woman and a child, presumably her child. Consequently, what you have going on here is, as she has said, the fine mid and late 19th century habit of putting money over for ideology. If you think the 1980s were great for good and read is good, you've got nothing on the latter part of the 19th century. The land that was chosen was part of the allotments of 13 different Wyandottes, either individuals or families. Under the Treaty of 1855, Wyandottes were able to obtain U.S. citizenship for all who supposedly desired it, and the Wyandotte Reserve was divided up into individual allotments. A process that was called severalty. The size of the allotments varied depending on how many members there were in the family, whether there were any existing improvements on the property, and so forth. But in the case of Quindaro, they were able to obtain not title, because the Wyandottes had not yet received title to their allotments, but they were able to get, if you could, liens on the presumed eventual assignment of these allotments, because they knew what the general locations of the allotments were. By December, the pretty picture you've seen was drawn up by Owen A. Bassett. There was actually a subdivision plat that was prepared from that by a surveyor named P.H. Woodard. The town covered from A Street, which is the present north-south 42nd Street, to Y Street, which is the present 17th Street, 10th Street on the south, which is the present Parkview Avenue, north to the river, and the main street, Kansas Avenue, took the place of Q Street. That's the present 27th. The plat included Quindaro Park, which still exists. It did not include a cemetery. This is another point of confusion sometimes. The cemetery on is the cemetery of the African American community that began forming in the Quindaro area during the Civil War. When I first saw it about in 1967, the earliest stone that I could identify had a date of about 1871. The Quindaro Cemetery, the town cemetery, was a mile to the south at the northeast corner of 38th and Parallel. That had been the property of the Wyandottes Methodist Episcopal Church. That's where various individuals from Quindaro were buried, including the Reverend Eben Blatchley. But the park is still there. The streets, a lot of them are still there. They just have changed their names. One Hiram Hill of Massachusetts wrote to Samuel Simpson in December that had received a map of the new town or information on newly purchased lands. He would like to buy 2 or 3 town shares if they're not too expensive. And this is an interesting statement. His aim is first to make money, secondly, to help the cause of freedom in Kansas. As for how much land in Quindaro was going for, it escalated very rapidly. The Reverend John G. Pratt, who was the Delaware's Baptist missionary, bought 1 share on December 26th of 56. He paid it for $150 for that share. A share consisted of 10 contiguous lots. A few months later, I'll find my reference here. By January, it's being announced that shares are, remember, this is $150 in December 26th. In January, shares were going between $500 $500 and $700 apiece. The first building to go up in town around January 1st, that's the date's always been given, but I suspect there's a little leeway there, was the town company office, which was just an 8 by 10 wood frame structure. It was immediately west of the Quindaro House Hotel, which was under construction almost immediately. In mid-January, Thaddeus Hyatt left Lawrence, but for the east, intending to acquire 2 steamboats to run between Quindaro and Lawrence. We tend to forget that the Kansas River was considered navigable up until the time the railroads persuaded the state legislature to declare it unnavigable. Again, like I'm having to leaf through this thing, so. And see what really is pertinent to what we want to talk about. Okay. New England Immigrant Aid Company's involvement when Quindaro was minimal. They had the makings equipment for a sawmill sitting in Kansas City, Missouri, warehouse, basically. They traded it to the Quindaro Town Company for 10 shares, something that their agent, Samuel C. Pomeroy, objected to. That mill equipment was eventually put into use. At one point, Quindaro had the largest steam sawmill operation in Kansas Territory. The sawmill site was on the river, towards the very east end of the town plat, basically about where 18th Street comes down to the river right now. In terms of the money floating at this point, February 18th, a pastor in Parkville wrote that shares have already risen from $150 to $750, and they have called a ministry offering him $2,000 a year, which was 5 times this minister's annual salary. First store in Quindaro opened on March 4th of 1857. That was property of W.J. McCown at 172 Main Street, which was just northwest of the Quindaro house. There were 2 streets that ran diagonally parallel to the river, Levee Street and Main Street. And those, because they were on the relatively flat land adjacent to the river, were buildable. And that's where most of the warehouse structures and several of the larger stores went. Construction along Kansas Avenue was fitful, shall we say, mostly towards the lower end, like the Quindaro House Hotel. The railroad. There actually was one. It wasn't built, but there was a railroad. The Parkville, Grand River, and Burlington Railroad. It was intended to run from Parkville diagonally up to Cameron, Missouri, where it was going to link to the Hannibal and St. Joseph Railroad running east and west across Missouri. The big promoter of this was Colonel George S. Park, the founder of Parkville, who, by the way, was not a pro-slavery Missourian, something that got him into trouble with some of his fellow townspeople. He published a newspaper in Parkville. It complained about the illegal elections in Kansas Territory, and the townspeople of Parkville promptly dumped the press into the river. southeast corner of Levy and Kansas Avenue. The railroad was organized on March 11th, 1857, very early into the development of Quindaro. A ferry for Quindaro. Came a little later. The April 1st, 1857, Quindaro House Hotel opened, 5 stories, wood frame, not stone or brick. Like most hotels of the period, in fact, most hotels at least up through the 1940s, the ground floor was predominantly commercial space. It supposedly had room for 250 guests. It was the second largest hotel in the Territorial at that point. Am I running out of time here? But I'm trying to give you an idea of just how rapidly things went initially. Public school organized April 14th, 1857. And this is where you get into another one of the dichotomies with Quindaro. Quindaro had 2 public schools, one for white children, one for black children. And this division actually persisted up past Quindaro's demise. The present Quindaro Elementary School, which I honestly don't know if it's been closed or not, someone would have to tell me.
No, it's not.
Its playground, that is the site of the white children's school. The school for black children was further north on the corner of, actually near where the old Vernon School is now, on the corner of Parkview and 27. Quindaro Steam Sawmill went into operation in April of '57. Things just were booming and rolling here. But as she stated, you've got a recession countrywide that's going to deepen into depression, and we tend to think about Quindaro dying. Things were very bad all across Kansas Territory. No money anywhere. Plus, there was a 2.5-year drought that coincided with how Quindaro hung on for as long as it did is really kind of amazing. And since I'm probably running way up past here, a couple of general comments. The business section of Quindaro died, but a lot of the residences, particularly those up on the higher part of the hill, on the flatland as it were, remained inhabited. The 2 Quindaro schools remained in operation. The 2 Quindaro churches, one Congregational and one Methodist, remained in operation at least through the 1870s. Again, they were on top of the hill. They weren't down in the inaccessible portions of Quindaro. There's an 1870 map of Quindaro, of Wyandotte County, I should say, which is very large and incredibly detailed. It still has the outlines of Quindaro street system noted on it, and has a number of businesses 3 agricultural concerns, 2 dry goods and variety stores, a wagon maker, a chair factory. And this is also the first mapped indication of Freedmen's University that I've ever seen. And while for years the story was that it was initially located in the old Quindaro Brewery building in the valley, this map locates it in a more reasonable location, about halfway up Kansas Avenue on the east side. There were 3 or 4 small commercial buildings, 34, 36, 38, and 40 Kansas Avenue. And that's where Freedmen's University was located in 1870. But what I'm trying to get here is how quickly development got rolling in Quindaro. And also how mixed were the motives of some of the people involved. Mrs. Nichols, who you're going to hear more about, resigned from the Quindaro Chindoo the same day that the editor put in the paper that no, Quindaro citizens wouldn't dream of aiding escaped slaves. I suspect there's not a coincidence between her resignation and that editorial statement. On the Underground Railroad, well, somebody asked me about it later because there is a specific letter referring to Underground Railroad operations in Quindaro. Not a later recollection, but a contemporary letter. And I didn't even know it existed until a number of years ago when a professor at Kansas Community College found it in Lawrence and said, "Oh, you might like to see this." And I said, "Oh, that's a smoking gun." He says, "What do you mean? Doesn't everybody know the Underground Railroad is operation there?" I said, "Yeah, but this is the written proof."